We hadn't planned on doing anything for Halloween. It was one of those years where everyone seemed too busy or broke to throw a party, and we were all desperate for something to do. My friends and I were sitting around my apartment, scrolling through our phones, complaining about the lack of plans. That's when Leah, always the bold one, decided to take matters into her own hands. She posted on social media, asking if anyone knew of any parties happening nearby. It didn't take long for a response. A guy she barely remembered from some summer concert messaged her, saying there was a party happening one town over. The guy, Rafe, told her that his friend's older brother was throwing it, and it was supposed to be wild. Big house, lots of people, plenty of drinks, he promised. We hesitated for a second, but Leah convinced us. It was already late, and we didn't have many options. Besides, it was Halloween night. What's the worst that could happen? We piled into my car, excitement bubbling up as we made our way out of the city. The town we were headed to was about 30 minutes away, tucked off the main highway and down a series of winding roads. As we drove further away from the familiar lights of home, the night seemed to grow darker, the trees looming taller, casting eerie shadows across the road. The GPS guided us down a nearly deserted street, and then finally we arrived. The house was massive, old, dimly lit from the inside. It stood on the edge of the woods, its tall windows gleaming like the eyes of some predatory beast. I glanced at my friends. The place didn't exactly scream, "fun Halloween party." It looked more like the setting for a bad horror movie. But Rafe had assured Leah that it was legit, so we shrugged it off and headed up the stone steps. The door creaked open before we could even knock, and a tall man greeted us with a wide, toothy smile. He was older than we'd expected, probably in his late 40s or 50s, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans that looked a bit too clean for someone hosting a party. His eyes were dark, almost unsettling, but he welcomed us in with a warm voice. "Come on in, kids," he said, extending his arms as if he were an old friend. "I'm Lennox. My son Jorah is the one throwing the party. He's around here somewhere." We exchanged awkward glances. There was no sign of Jorah or Rafe, and the house, while filled with people, was full of strangers. No one seemed to recognize us, and we definitely didn't recognize them. But Lennox was persistent, practically ushering us inside. Once in the foyer, the music thumped faintly from somewhere deeper in the house. The lighting was strange, dim and almost sickly yellow, casting long shadows against the walls. People milled about, but there was an odd energy in the air, as if no one was quite sure what they were doing there. Lennox offered us drinks, gesturing to a makeshift bar set up in the corner of the room. I noticed right away that Lennox seemed particularly interested in the girls. He hovered around Leah and Anya, handing them drinks, his eyes lingering a little too long. I could tell they were getting uncomfortable, but we all tried to shake it off. It was a party after all. Maybe he was just trying too hard to be a good host, but things got weirder as the night wore on. We never saw Jorah, the supposed host. Every time someone asked Lennox where he was, he would give vague answers. "Oh, he's just upstairs," or "he'll be down in a bit." But Jorah never appeared. The crowd wasn't thinning either. People seemed to come and go, but we never saw anyone leaving through the front door. At one point, Lennox insisted on making more drinks for us, claiming the ones we'd had were too weak. His behavior had started to cross the line from friendly to unsettling, especially when he put his arm around Anya and kept whispering things in her ear. I watched her stiffen, pulling away uncomfortably. "Let's just leave," I whispered to Leah. The uneasiness in the room was becoming too thick to ignore. The music, the lights, the strange people. It all felt wrong, like we had walked into something we shouldn't have. Leah nodded, but as we gathered our things, I noticed my phone had died. I frowned, remembering I had plugged it into the charger by the wall earlier. When I checked, it hadn't charged at all. The battery was still at 0. My heart pounded faster in my chest as a wave of dizziness swept over me. My vision blurred, and the room seemed to tilt on its axis. I reached out for the wall, feeling the floor sway beneath my feet. "Guys," I slurred, trying to stay upright. "Something's wrong." The last thing I remember was Lennox's face hovering over mine, his smile stretched too wide, his eyes glinting with something dark. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the backseat of my car. My head was pounding, and I felt nauseous, my mouth dry like cotton. Leah was driving, her face pale, and Anya was in the passenger seat, staring blankly out the window. It was early morning, the sky just beginning to lighten, casting a gray hue over the world outside. "What the hell happened?" I croaked, my voice weak. "You passed out," Anya said softly. We're going home." I glanced at my phone, which was now in my lap, and unlocked it. That's when I saw the messages. One after another, they filled my screen, all from an unknown number. "Had fun tonight? See you again soon?" The next message sent a chill down my spine. "I know where you live." I stared at the screen, heart racing. Somehow Lennox had gotten my number. But how? None of it made sense. But as we drove further from that house, the nightmare was far from over. I sat there in the back seat, my hands trembling as I stared at the messages. The words seemed to crawl across the screen like something alive, something taunting. I looked up at Leah, her eyes locked on the road, her face pale and tight with worry. Anya was still silent, her fingers gripping the door handle so hard her knuckles were white. "How does he know where I live?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Leah glanced at me in the rearview mirror, her expression dark. "I don't know, but we need to figure this out. This isn't normal." The rest of the drive home was a blur. None of us spoke. The tension in the car was thick, and the eerie quiet of the early morning outside only made it worse. Every time I glanced at my phone, another message would pop up. Some were short, just random strings of letters and numbers. But others were more specific. "You looked so peaceful when you were out. I can't wait to see you again. Soon." My stomach churned, and my hands felt clammy. By the time we pulled up in front of my house, the sun had just started to peek over the horizon, casting an orange glow over everything. The warm light should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Instead, it just made the world feel more surreal, as if I had woken up in a nightmare that refused to end. Leah parked the car and turned around to face me. "We'll figure this out," she said, but her voice was shaky, like she didn't believe her own words. I nodded, too exhausted to argue. My head was still pounding, and the dizziness hadn't completely faded. Anya gave me a quick hug before they drove off, leaving me standing alone in my driveway, the eerie quiet of the morning settling around me. As soon as I stepped inside my house, I locked the door, double-checking every window and latch, even though I knew it wouldn't make a difference. I collapsed onto my couch, my mind racing, my body still trembling from whatever had happened at that party. I tried to make sense of the events, of Lennox, the house, the messages, but nothing added up. Jorah had never shown up. Rafe had disappeared. Lennox had somehow gotten my number, and that last message, "I know where you live." It was burned into my mind, looping over and over like a broken record. I needed to sleep, but the thought of closing my eyes terrified me. What if I woke up somewhere else again? What if Lennox, or whoever he really was, showed up here? My phone buzzed again, and I flinched, staring down at the screen. "I'm outside!" My heart stopped. Without thinking, I jumped up and ran to the nearest window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. The street was empty. No cars, no figures standing in the shadows. But the message had been clear. "I'm outside." Suddenly my phone rang, the loud tones slicing through the silence like a blade. I nearly dropped it in my panic. The caller ID was unknown, but I knew who it had to be. My heart hammered in my chest as I hesitated, then swiped to answer. "Hello?" My voice shook. There was silence on the other end. No breathing, no noise, just empty static. I was about to hang up when a low, raspy voice crackled through the line. "I told you, I know where you live." I slammed the phone down, my pulse racing out of control. My body felt like it was on fire, a sickening combination of fear and adrenaline coursing through me. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be real. I needed help. Now I grabbed my keys and rushed back outside, jumping into my car and speeding down the road toward Leah's place. I wasn't about to spend another second alone, not with Lennox, or whoever that was, stalking me. Every few minutes I glanced in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see a car following me, or worse, that twisted smile of Lennox's face looming in the back seat. I made it to Leah's apartment in record time, pounding on her door until she opened it, looking just as shaken as I was. "What the hell is going on?" she asked, pulling me inside. Anya was already there, sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. I explained everything. The messages, the phone call, the creeping feeling that Lennox wasn't done with us yet. Leah's face hardened as I spoke, but Anya just sat there, her eyes wide and distant, as if she wasn't fully present. "We need to go to the police," Leah said. "Now." It wasn't a question. I nodded, knowing she was right, even though my gut told me that the cops wouldn't believe us. What would we say? That some guy we barely knew had drugged us at a party in a creepy old house? That he'd gotten our phone numbers and was now stalking us? It sounded insane, but we had no other choice. At the police station, we recounted the entire story. The officers took our statements, but they were skeptical from the start. The house, according to their records, had been vacant for years. No one named Lennox lived there. There was no Jorah, no party, no sign of anything unusual. The officers assured us they'd look into it, but their dismissive tone made it clear they didn't believe a word we said. It wasn't until later that night, after Leah and Anya had both gone to bed, that my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a picture of my house, taken from just outside my bedroom window. I froze, staring at the screen in horror. I ran to the window, flinging the curtains aside, but once again there was nothing there. Just the empty, quiet street. But the picture on my phone was proof. He was out there, and he wasn't going to stop. My phone buzzed again. "I'll see you soon,"